So we're sitting here today with founder, executive director, and grand fromage of Estraios, Ruth Ann Ritchie.
Hi, Chris.
How are you doing today?
Great, how are you?
I'm doing quite well. We're obviously doing these to get to know everybody a little bit better, and specifically the musician side of things, I think is what we'd like to talk about. So do you want to tell everybody how you came to be a flutist?
So I have the very adorable story that apparently when I was the age of 2, my parents had an LP of Jean-Pierre Rampal, very famous French flute player, and his recording of the Bach flute sonatas. And on the cover of the LP was a picture of his golden flute. And apparently at the age of 2, while my parents were listening to this, I was pointing at the cover and saying, "Mommy, I want to do that." And I think my parents were kind of like, yeah, that's cute, whatever. And, you know, at the age of 2, you cannot play the flute, but I kept saying, "Mommy, I want to do that." And so finally when I was, I believe, 5, they gave me one of those little wooden recorders, you know, like every kid has to play in elementary school. It makes horrible sounds. And they said, "Well, if you practice this, then we'll think about getting you a flute." So I think that I'm the only kid in the world that actually practiced the recorder because I wanted the flute so badly. So finally, for Christmas, when I was in 3rd grade, my parents bought me a flute, and the rest is history because then I haven't put it down since.
So that's definitely how you started playing the flute, but talk a little more all the training and stuff that you've gone through, all the kind of education that you've gotten as a musician.
Sure. So I took private lessons. Starting out, it was with the band director at my school, and then eventually one of the band directors there, because band directors, and especially in Cleveland at the time, they played all the instruments. They didn't specialize in one, and so they said, you know, if you're really serious about this, you need to go find an actual flute player to teach you. So I started taking lessons at the Cleveland Institute of Music, and I studied there in their preparatory division for a few years. And then I started taking lessons at the Cleveland Music School Settlement, which is a community music school in Cleveland. And Linda White was my flute teacher, and if you've been following Estraios for a while, then you have seen Linda White perform. We love having Linda. She was a huge influence on my life and my career, because I think I probably would have quit playing the flute if it hadn't been for Linda. So give Linda a ton of credit for the fact that I'm still sitting here and still doing this. And so then I went on, I got my undergraduate degree from Indiana University, and then eventually did graduate work in Sydney, Australia, and then started performing and Estraiosing and all the things professionally right after grad school.
Well, talk to us a little bit about that in terms of what a day in the life of Ruth Ann looks like when she's not playing the flute.
It's a very interesting life, and it is one that is very busy, but it's one that I really, really love because I feel like I get to use so many different sides of my brain. So as the executive director of Estraios, I handle all of the business aspects of it, but because I also founded the organization, it's my brainchild, and I'm the one responsible for setting the vision and the plans and what it is that we're trying to do with the organization. So it's a lot of creative problem solving. It is things like fundraising and accounting and the mechanics of the business, but it's also trying to find the best people that to constantly be broadening our network and finding the right people that can do this interactive work of performing, but also teaching while they do that. So I've been doing Estraios. We were founded in 2007, so we're getting to be, we're getting close to 20 actually when you start doing the math there. We're getting pretty close there. So I spend a significant portion of my day working on all of those different problem solving things. I do also, people are slightly confused by this, but I am also the executive director of a professional choir, the Orpheus Chamber Singers, which is based in Dallas. I teach a handful of students. I still perform professionally. I still gig in the area, so I will play weddings and church performances and whatever I get called for. And then I do also some consulting on the side for young musicians that are looking to start a nonprofit arts organization, not with specifically with the same kind of mission as the Strauss, but organizations that are they're trying to be set up as nonprofits and learning the mechanics to get them set up properly. So right from the get-go, they've got the business side down so that they can grow properly and be able to realize the vision of what they want to do with their art.
A lot of things.
Do I sleep? Not as much as I should.
So you've performed with lots of different groups and do gigging and stuff all around and have a wide background. And you run 2 arts organizations. What is it that you try to do with the Strauss differently than maybe from some of the other things that you've been a part of in the past?
Well, when I started at Strauss, I was, like I said, I was coming out of grad school. And I had already at that point, I started playing professionally when I was 12. Again, just church gigs and that kind of thing. But I was already making some money from performing. And I very quickly found that the performer's needs and really just the performer's needs were not taken care of. And it was very much a lot of times it was a very uptight performance kind of experience, that there was so much pressure put on everything about this has to go absolutely perfectly that you can't perform well that way when everything is so incredibly tight and stringent and just, aggressive almost. And so I knew that it was bad for the performers, that it's a very quick way to burn out the performers if that's the expectation that you have. And it also wasn't any fun, and as much hard work as it is being a musician, it is an absolute blast. I love it so much. And our tagline is serious music, serious fun. It is serious work, but that doesn't mean that there isn't enjoyment in the work that we do. So when I was starting with Strauss, and even to this day, what I try to do for it is I try to make it so that however I'm setting it up, that I have tried to think all the way through what the performers need. And I know that I never hit all of the things, because there's always more things, but I really want to give the performers and the musicians the chance to feel free and open when they're performing, that they don't have to be thinking about, I'm also responsible for XYZ that's got to happen, or the stage cue, or I don't really know what's going to happen. When am I supposed to go on stage? I want to have thought all the way through that process so that it can be as freeing as possible. And when we're looking to hire people, we like to find people who are flexible, and we'd like to have people that have a good sense of humor. It's very important to us, so that the experience in rehearsals is very congenial. We are a chamber music organization, so that means that, even though I'm the executive director, I'm not the conductor of the ensemble. We're all working together to pull the piece together. And so everybody has to enter into it with a spirit of cordiality and congeniality. And we experiment a lot, because, if you've watched our concerts, we don't do standard instrumentation, It's not always a string quartet that was written by Beethoven, where you've trained and you've studied and you know what this is. It's picking things up and saying, what can we learn from this by trying something differently? And, and it's fun to do that, because, it's like being a kid again and just getting to experiment and get in. And it's like, that's the core of why we all became musicians to begin with.
That's a wonderful answer.
Thank you.
Talk just a little bit about Strauss and food.
Yes, Strauss 100% believes in good food. As most people who have watched Strauss have figured out, I'm married to Michael Jones, who is our bassoonist and our programming director, and he is also a phenomenal chef. And so we firmly believe that any kind of Strauss performance, that there needs to be good food in the rehearsals, and that it's part of the deal. Our musicians know that they will be fed well if they agree to a project. It's sort of known in musician circles that if you present a bunch of food, if there's ever free food at a gig, instrumentalists will clean you out. if there's some kind of a church potluck, or there's everybody's, they offer you dinner after you play the wedding reception or something like that, the musicians are going to handle it. We just consider it part of our pay, I guess, I don't know, or we're just starving from the work of actually performing. But one of the things that we have done a lot from Astraios, and part of it is because my husband is such a really good cook, and also a lot of our Astraios audience knows Natasha Merchant, the cake merchant, who's a good friend of ours for over 20 years, who's a baker. We just started incorporating food and fun food into our rehearsals, and sometimes we have them, post-concert receptions and that sort of thing. And it's true that having a meal with someone, it just brings you together because everybody kind of relaxes a little bit, and it's just, again, it's part of that wanting to be friends with the people that we're working with, and that's a very easy way to sit down and come together. And after a performance, every musician is, you're very high on adrenaline anyway, and so it's great to be able to come together and sort of do the post-concert breakdown over a meal together.
And the meals are good.
Michael has a very high reputation that he has to maintain, it's true. Yes.
And for people who might not recall, Natasha also has performed with...
Natasha Merchant, she's an oboist. You will see her later this season with the August Winds Quintet, so our college woodwind quintet's coming back again. But yes, and the Cake Merchant blog is where you can follow her baking adventures.
Well, we've talked about how you run an Astraios gig, making sure that everything is taken care of, that the musicians are taken care of and fed. What's something unusual or unexpected that's happened at a gig, Astraios or otherwise, that you've been a part of?
Well, I think every musician has a million of these stories, and I think we'll all hopefully become famous one day when we all write our memoirs of the things we have done. So in terms of on the production side of things, I have had, for Astraios, we once had to cancel concerts because of wildfires in Colorado. So that was pretty dramatic. On the Orpheus side of things, I very famously had to find a violinist on about 5 hours notice because the previous violinist had gotten snowed in somewhere, so there's all the natural disaster stories. I have played a million outdoor gigs where I'm fairly positive I have inhaled a bug or two and still had to manage to keep playing. I remember one performance I did when I was still pretty young, actually. It was probably around the age of 12, I guess, that I was playing in a church setting, and I was playing with my mother, who's a classical guitarist, and we were doing flute and guitar duets. And the air conditioner came on, and one of the pages of my music fell over onto my shoulder, which also, in hindsight, means that I was standing way too close to the stand, but I was 12, so it's fine. But I just remember thinking very logically in my head that I couldn't step back and let the page fall, because if I did, it was going to fly over and hit my mother while she was playing. And so I was like, I'm going to stand here, even though I look like an idiot with this page on my shoulder, because I was already thinking about the other performers. Yes, so there's all those sorts of things. There have been performances where the conductors stopped and had to restart because things were not going well. I also remember. Do you want other stories?
One more to go on.
Well, this one is not necessarily something that went wrong, but I have. One of the most memorable gigs that I ever played was for a Game of Thrones themed Halloween party. I was hired with a harpist, Jamie Hafner, who actually has played on Astraios concerts before, the harp professor up at UNT. And yes, we were hired to play some what was supposed to be Celtic background music. So there was not a specific, it was just kind of show up. But they put us in costume. And the entire, this was a billionaire's home, and so the entire house was converted into a set for Game of Thrones. They had blocked off the entire back window and put staging or curtains and piping. They had hired actors to enact things. They had an ice sculpture of the wall. It was a whole thing. So
certainly sounds memorable.
It was a thing. Yes.
What's one of the most rewarding experiences that you've had as a musician playing a piece or working with a particular group?
Let's see. One of the performances that I remember, it wasn't a public performance, but so thinking back to, it was the Bach flute sonatas that made me want to play the flute. And still to this day, the Bach flute sonatas, I would play them all day long if I could. I just absolutely love them. And in particular, I love the A minor partita and the Bach B minor, and they are two of the most difficult pieces to perform on flute. They're intense. And I have only ever been able to perform the Bach partita in its entirety one time, and so this is a solo flute sonata, so it's just you and the music. And part of the reason that it's so complicated is because you're essentially accompanying yourself. It's like you're playing multiple lines of music at the same time, so you've got the harmonies and the melodies going, and there's no place to breathe, and it's Bach, and so it's very intricate and whatever. But the only time that I've ever been able to do that piece in its entirety was in a master class when I was in college. And I loved it so much, just the experience of doing it. I mean, I know that there were a million things wrong with it, and when I go to hopefully someday be able to perform this piece again in its entirety like that, I will change everything about how I did it. But it was just one of those moments of sort of coming full circle of from 2-year-old me wanting to do this to being, I was 20 at the time, I think, when I did it in the master class. And it is a thing to be able to play that entire piece. It is exhausting. And so trying to keep the focus of the audience from that many minutes, and also trying to keep yourself focused for that many minutes. But it's just kind of a dance with you and Bach. And it's something I hope that I get to perform that again someday.
Sounds really special.
It was, yeah.
Well, if you hadn't been able to play the flute, if they had refused to get you that recorder, what instrument do you think you might have chosen?
That's a hard question, because I feel like it's just sort of hardwired into me that I was meant to be a flute player. I do love the sound of the cello. I think that probably just sort of balances out, right? The flute to the cello, and of course I'm married to a bassoonist, and so now I have to love the sound of the bassoon. I am also very partial. I'm not sure that I would have ever played it, but I'm very partial to the sound of the classical guitar, and I know part of that's because my mother is a classical guitarist, and so I just grew up with that sound around me. But I love the repertoire, the colors that a classical guitar can produce.
Did you ever learn to play anything else?
Like most musicians, I play piano. We all, for those of you who don't know, when you're in music school, you have to pass a basic piano proficiency. And through various reasons that should not have happened, they sort of passed me out of it too soon, and I kind of wish that they had not, and I had gotten some more actual piano training. My brain does not work like a pianist. I don't think in terms of chords and very linear. Like, as a flutist, I'm focused on the one line and the shape that one line makes, and so my brain was never entirely happy playing piano. But I am, as a professional flutist, you do have to play everything in the flute family, so piccolo, alto flute, bass flute, theoretically contrabass flute. I have never played one of those the contrabass flutes, but unfortunately I don't own an alto flute or a bass flute. I have to borrow those when I do need to play them, but those are a lot of fun to play. They're really rich sound.
Mm-hmm. I want to see you play the contrabass.
Yeah, right. You need to find a contrabass. Yeah.
Well, if you hadn't become a musician or an arts administrator, what do you think you would be? Again,
this is a really hard question, because I feel like it is so, I don't know if it's predestined or something, but it's just something that I have always, I've just known that I was going to be an artist, and there really wasn't another option. I sort of, I liked geology as a kid. I thought that was kind of fun. I liked meteorology as a kid. I thought that was fun, but it was never something that I seriously thought that I was going to pursue. And when I started with Astraios and I was having to learn a lot of the accounting and the legal issues and those sorts of things, I was very frustrated, because I was, it was like trying to learn it on the fly. I was like, man, this just really doesn't make any sense to me. And but my father was an auditor and a CPA, and so I was more comfortable with the business terms than I think a lot of musicians are. And so by moving fairly stepwise, I was able to kind of, you know, translate it and figure it out. And I'm not sure though that I ever would have ended up as an accountant or as an attorney. I mean, I can understand those worlds now, but I still have to bring them back to the art. I have to use them to make it make sense for the musicians and what is it that I need to know about these things to be able to serve other musicians.
Cool. What's a common misperception about the flute, or about being a flutist?
A lot of people think that it is an easy instrument to play, and they think that it's a very girly instrument to play. So I've done occasionally, I will go and help band departments where they will, the fifth graders that are picking out their instrument, what they're going to play in sixth grade, they will, come and try out all the instruments and find what their instrument is. And very often, the fifth grade boys will want to have nothing to do with the flute because they're like, "Ew, it's shiny and only girls play it, and I don't want to," But people do not realize how physical it is to play the flute. It takes an incredible amount of air support and an incredible amount of air because you have to learn how to basically create your own resistance when you play, because unlike all the other instruments where there's a mouthpiece and there's something that's fighting back on the air, we're blowing across an open hole, and so you have to learn all of the muscles inside of what's actually controlling the air as it comes out. And so people think it's just, you just do. It's not that. It's hard work to play the flute. It's fairly easy to play the flute on a mediocre level, but it is not at all easy to play on an advanced level. It takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.